Okay, everyone, I am sorry about the delay in getting the stream together. Little kid didn't want to go to bed on time. Uh, so, you have to do what you need to do. And I wasn't really planning on doing a stream. It's like yesterday I did one, and here I am today doing another one. It's like, what's going on? Billy's actually getting into the swing of things? Well, maybe not. But yesterday's stream brought up some ideas, I suppose, and I figure, well, it gave way to further developments, shall we say. So I felt it pertinent to be on the ball a little bit and not leave things dwindling unaddressed. So let's get on with it, I suppose. Now, yesterday's stream was covering why there could be alternative or nefarious reasons. We'd like to hope they're not nefarious, but there can be not so apparent reasons that drive this mechanism of wanting to have away time, departure time, absence. So to tack on a little bit onto that, because there's a few points I missed out mentioning. And then I want to address what seems to be that happened in the chat box during that stream, and we'll take it from there. We'll progress forward, hopefully. So I hope everyone is okay this evening. We'll start off with a little number, as per usual, to get ourselves settled. For one, I need to get myself settled. I've literally just got the kid into bed, and I'm just lighting the candles to keep myself warm, and about to have my insulin shot because that's delayed, and I'm gonna get my pills ready. And while I settle myself down and get my notes brought up, anyway, let's get on with an intro. Now that we've started, share screen, share audio. Yeah, this audio playlist of mine, who was it was bringing it up? It was Johnny Midnight, I think. It's a bit sporadic. Like I'll just star random tracks for future reference. It might not necessarily be like my go-to what I prefer in music, but there might be tracks selected for occasional use, like this one I have here, Somewhere Fuse. It's not, I don't normally look up sad genre, but this topic is going to be covering quite the emotional journey aspect of the conversation. Right. Well, that little number. Ooh, here I am trying to tell people to be more in control of their emotions and emotionally literate, and there I am setting the tone. Because this is going to be a bit of a mixture of we're going to be addressing this idea of fighting, this idea of wanting peace. Many people comment that's what they want. So what's the problem here? Why is it cannot be achieved? Will it ever be achieved? And is this the inherent nature of men or something like that? Well, as we're going to soon find out, there's more than meets the eye, and and ultimately we're gonna have a special. I got a special a letter from someone, um, and it's going to be a letter of heartache, and that's why I selected that track, because at the core of all of this is pain, is hurt and wounds and injury. So that's why, as blood flowing as it might seem, with fighting and conflict and aggression, actually beneath it all, what's behind an angry man? It's someone who is crying. So that is why I chose that track. Now, good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us all here, Iridium Kush. I'll just fly through these comments if you don't mind. Kush, I caught your stream earlier. I'm not sure if it's your very last one. You said many kind things. Thank you very much. And this issue with I don't really want to shed. How do I put this? How do I put this? Sometimes people do not need to explicitly say they need help in order for them to communicate it in other ways. You don't necessarily need to say you need help, but from actions and behaviors, and with understanding and compassion, we can see sometimes that this is really what is being communicated. Kush, do not worry, you do not need to apologize. And now, Tim, Tim, I would like to commend in I've been noticing over, I'm not sure how long, but I think Reviving Real News was getting cancelled or timed out or something like this last time. I do not know why. I don't know if it's a technical error or something like that. I've checked. So Tim was getting a bit on the receiving end of foul play, and I think and not just on that occasion, but he's been on the receiving end of what we would really call abusive behavior. It's not nice stuff. It might not be maliciously malicious in nature, but still, I mean, he's held his composure. He's maintained his dignity. He's been calm, collected, respectful, and I think is model behavior, a good role model in how to deal with people who might be having struggles and issues. You know, he didn't. I didn't see him taking it personally, and he was willing to still be friends and not let it ruin a potential friendly relationship. So very proud of you there, Tim. Well done. So I do not believe for 1 second Tim was cancelling Reviving Real News. And in light of whatever happened, I have made him a mod, and I've made a few of you others as mods as well. So there isn't any favoritism, and you can all have your say. No one should be, you should be immune to such things happening. And if there's anyone I've missed out, I'll try and catch them, and I'll mod those people as well. And I shouldn't need to say it. It's like I mod you guys for a reason. You guys I consider as friends, brothers, people I can trust, people I respect. So if you're a harpy feminist, you're not gonna get a wrench from me. So let's get rid of this screen. Let's bring on some. Now I was trying to find a photo that wasn't this photo. I was like, well, but it kind of gets the point across. It's like my heart is at war. I'm gonna punch you. I'm gonna punch you to death with my love. Where was I in sharing the comments? So let's just quickly fly through this. Okay. So I'm doing this so that you guys feel like your voices are getting shown on the screen. You're getting aired. You're getting a little bit of validation. So, oh, what's that? Outlaw, I didn't get a notification on your new vid. Oh, damn, Susie. Yeah, I've been hearing some people not getting notifications recently. Now, hopefully this stream's not going to be 2 hours long. Right, and so Angler, like we don't think Tim was doing it. I don't see why he would be doing it, logically speaking, anyway. And the issue hopefully has been resolved. So let's all just calm ourselves down, slow down, and try not to be as triggered. We're going to cover this aspect of getting triggered. This what will be which will be the ego defense, really. That is kicking into gear with hypervigilance. We need to get on top of this before it already has gotten on top of us. At this point here, Angler here, I believe that the idea that we're all here for similar reasons is getting lost. I think you might find, as we have these discussions, that there is a commonality in source of origin, but how it proliferates and how it's managed or dealt with is where we see this variation, and this might be what you're describing as the reasons being lost. People are going in different directions. A little bit like how I was saying in the previous stream, something like the path to masculinity, or what the MGTOW journey is trying to tell you, is that there isn't a set particular way of getting there. And in fact, in all actuality, every person's journey is going to be a personal, individual one. So just because maybe you have gone through a path of, I don't know, like academia, doesn't mean someone who who didn't go to college isn't any less of a man. We still arrive at the same destination, and we come from the same original source of infancy. It's the in between where people go their their own ways, and rightly so. No one should be walking in the footsteps of another or in the shadow of another. Now, it's one thing to get guidance or advice or role models to get an idea and a gist, but do not think that that person who you're looking towards is doing the work for you. You still need to do those. You need to take those steps for yourself. And if you can do that without such role models, I mean, typically as people get older, they kind of reduce their number of role models or people they aspire to, because they start to become that for the next generation. And it's much more, I think people find it's more dignifying because you really are taking your own strides at that point. You know, you've learned enough to know how your feet operate and which foot you put first, and you know how to keep your balance, and you don't need someone to hold your hand anymore. So yeah, so individual journeys. No, she doesn't need a wrench, Kush. She needs a buffing wheel, some polish. Yes, and this is we're going to have this intricate discussion of self versus ego. So who is it we're talking to? Are we talking to an actual person, or are we communicating to their ego? And this is where the rubber meets the road. And this is why, in part, I'm happy to have potentially what we would deem as trolls, even if Alice wanted to come here, Celibate Scorpion, or whoever these women are. If they've got legit questions and are not trying to play some silly little game, then fair enough. To me, this would be like the honesty of the inner child wanting to ask questions. But if it's their ego that is bringing them here and they want to sort of flex or be a buffoon, or steal the spotlight or attention or something like this because the ego is so out of control, then they can F off, not really even going to acknowledge it. So I suppose I could say, please leave egos at the door for everyone, because they are not required here. They will not be of any benefit or use. And if anything, if you try to deploy such ego, it will end up not really working in your favor. And with time, you're going to realize that if you've been using your ego as a defense mechanism, it's a desperation, really. It's not very effective when put to the test. Everything is allegedly, apparently now. You've got to play it safe because of people's silly feelings. Maybe I should really be like, yeah, or fuck your allegedly. Stick it up your ass. How about that? Hey, that just reminded me of a Billy Connolly joke. Oh no, I'll save it for another time. I don't want to go off topic too much. How should I? I don't know. Okay, all right. Just quickly fly through these. And we're at the bottom. Okay, great. Whew. Right, so to tack on to the end of the last stream about the departure, reasons why it may be for other reasons. I just jotted down in my notes. Now, I saw on James Bond Maxwell's stream, he had a lady on there who was complaining about not getting donations. So that could be another way of, what do you call it, like twisting someone's arm. Like I'm not getting treated how I expect, my entitled expectations. I'm not getting donations. I don't have fans. I'm not feeling empowered in masculinity or femininity, seeing as a girl. So I'm going to cry on camera. I mean, Mega Man does this sometimes. Cry on camera and play the violin, and maybe talk about, like, be all melodramatic. I put my life and soul into this. I risked my life putting it on the internet. No one's been making you do this. You've done it of your own free will. So that could be part of the, well, if I'm not getting my way, I'm going to leave and punish you. A little bit like the silent treatment. And so in the narcissistic book of tactics, the silent treatment is used as a form of control and punishment. And if this was a relationship, this would be domestic abuse. It might not seem very abusey, well, that's a word, but like if a man was to try and use that reason, I'm sure he'd get laughed at. But if a woman was telling people that she was given the silent treatment, they would probably feel sorry for her, and he would be so evil for giving her the cold shoulder. I want to make one thing clear: with a way of determining if this is a break for a healthy need, a good reason, like we said, like many of you were talking about in the chat last time, that it's good to have breaks. If it's one of those sort of things, or if this is a stunt, and when you get that whiff of, I feel like this is a stunt, follow the money, follow the intuition there. See, meditate on it a little bit. Does it align? Does it fit? Does it seem like an emotional thing rather than a situation of self-care and maturation? Because it'll be evident. You'll see the manipulator has to show at some level and at some point what this is all about, really. So if this is a game, a stunt, an emotional ploy to keep you on the hook and your attention, and have control over you because you're now waiting on their discretion, then you can see what is really at play. Now, I mentioned, I don't know what is in my notes here, I'll just say it anyway, I don't know if it really fits in, but I said before that MGTOW is a little bit like stabilizer wheels, and once you get your balance and you know how to ride the bike, you might still want your wheels, stabilizer wheels on there, but you start to realize that you don't really need them anymore. And so at that point, MGTOW, it's not like you necessarily discarded the wheels, the MGTOW wheels. I think it becomes more like your crash helmet. So it's there in case you need it. And at a later point, I'll mention how it should really be beside you. Now, here's a little section that I felt is probably a opposite. How can we look at it from the other point of view? If someone is departing, what's the opposite of departing? Well, they're arriving. What do we mean by arriving? How can we describe that with narcissistic language? Well, we can call that hoovering. So I will hoover, I will suck you back into the game. So understanding a bit of hoovering could also be of beneficial use here. We won't really cover it in much detail right now, but it's just something to sort of mention. Basically, the departure and the hoovering are both forms of gaining control and to keep the audience captivated. And what do we mean by captivated? To keep them captured. You're trapped. Case in point, we'll talk about some Sydney MGTOW, who apparently, I don't know the story, distanced himself from the manosphere or from MGTOW, I'm not sure which, and other people, not just him, who declare, I'm leaving social media, I'm not coming back, I'm burning it, I'm going to get rid of it. It might take a long time, years might pass, just like an ex-lover, but they come back. Now, it might not be from their own choice. Someone else they might be forced to come back. But now, like right now, me uttering the name Sydney MGTOW, I'm invoking his spirit. Come here, Sydney. I'm bringing you to life in this sphere. We are now discussing you. So you see, he hasn't escaped. I've just by name dropping, I've just pulled him back into this, back into what he was trying to get away from. So he could be angry with me and be like, "Damn it! Why did you say my name? I was trying to get distance from you, and here you are talking about me." So it's not really his fault, but we can see that sometimes these webs make it so that there is no real departure. In narcissistic language, the final discard really comes from the victim who says, I've had enough and no more. The narcissist will discard all the time, and they'll use that as a form of conditioning to keep you controlled. And the victim believes it is true, like, oh, my narcissistic lover has left me, I'm such a loser or whatever, I did wrong, they discarded me. And this isn't true. What they've done is as they describe it, they put you on the shelf for a later date to abuse you later on. You're just not required right now. So the narcissist is a hoarder, doesn't throw away their utensils. It just saves them for a later time when it could be of use. So the narcissist doesn't really discard people. It's only in your mind do you think this, because this is what they want you to think. So that's why the discard is really in the victim's hands, decision or discretion. I've got a point here about being careful not to be emotionally invested into the manosphere or any community space. It's better to be emotionally invested in yourself. So if you notice how passionate you feel about a community, about a space, a sphere, or such, you might want to keep your emotions in check or balance, because that can be a recipe for disaster if you're not careful. Right, but that is the tacking on to the last stream. Let's check the comments. Anything in particular I need to address here going forward? I mentioned to Billy a manipulation with trauma bonding. MAGA use cancel culture. Right, yeah. Well, MAGA Man is a very interesting. He's a book of. I could write a book about his behaviors. He's a case study. It's very petulant and very quite sneaky, quite crafty in what he's trying. But yeah, it's like a Pandora. I'm just thinking it's a Pandora's box if I try and start discussing it right now. Yes. Oh, Douglas. If you're not a wrench, I will wrench you after the show at some point. So there's a couple of sections we're gonna go through leading up. Oh, now, did anyone watch in the description of this stream? I wrote down something like, please go watch another video I made called Pain Is All I Have. Have any of you watched it? Do you know what I'm talking about? If not, I'll be playing it later on because it's very much tied into what we'll be discussing. The main crux of the problem or situation, because it kind of, we say we want peace, we want the fighting to stop. Why is something so simplistic sounding is so hard to achieve? It's because what you're talking about is a paradox, and that's why there is no stopping the fighting and no stopping, there's no achieving peace, because the two are a paradox. Like this picture, a heart, I'm going to punch you with my love. Now, how does that make sense? It doesn't. But in the mind of someone who is in turmoil, this is the difficulty they have, and why they have such injuries in the first place, is trying to find a solution to a paradox. The narcissist has a problem, a similar one, where on the one hand they are told they are useless and they are scum, and then on the other hand they are told they are the greatest and the best of the best. So they are the worst at the worst as well as the best of the best, both at the same time. It doesn't make sense. And this is why they form this protective shell, because they can no longer understand the nuances of life. It's like my kid, it's like a little angel, yeah? And at the same time, it's a little devil. How does that make sense? How can they be a devil and an angel? Well, it's because they're a kid. That's how. Sometimes we'll be a bit condescending with, like, look, you're trying to bring logic to a emotional situation. This is not going to be palatable. This ain't going to work. Well, we must acknowledge that sometimes, it's, we need to understand it from that emotional level, and logic, well, I suppose it is the same thing really, but logic isn't going to explain it. This is one of the mysteries and the deep philosophies of what is the meaning of life, for instance, or why do we even have emotions? They seem to just cause problems all the time. And it's because we're irresponsible and we're a bit naive to them. You cannot survive life without emotion. It's emotion that keeps you alive. Logically speaking, you'll be like, well, why am I even here? I should just end it all, and you wouldn't be here right now. So the fact that you're here listening to this stream and in this company, as critically minded as you might like to think you are, because you want to expand your awareness, but there is also an emotional element, investment, attachment that gives further meaning to why all of this is happening. And is there an answer? Does there even need to be one? This is one of the explorational quirks of the human nature, is this sort of it's a passion, but it can also be a like a gift and a curse. It's the gift of wonder, but we're cursed because we can never fully understand or know. Like trying to understand the cosmos and the universe. We're all, the scientists are fully aware that there's no way you can understand every aspect of the universe. Does it stop them from still exploring? Hell no. It's part of the fun and mystery. So the way I'm going to structure this, so I got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, and then I've got a special little letter. And if people haven't watched that video I was talking about, I'll probably be ending it with that video, which might be a bit of a somber note to end on. So I want to start off with talking about a warrior, a fighter, because we're talking about people fighting. So we're talking about fighters, right? We're talking about warriors. Now, shout out to Brother Falcon Black. He's a martial arts, I'm not sure what his grade is, and what his, I think, jujitsu. But for all intents purposes, he's a martial art ass kicker, put it that way. He's someone you wouldn't want to mess around with. He's been in combat, he's trained, he's disciplined. And if you were to say or describe what a fighter is, I would be leaning in that sort of direction. And what makes him distinctive from some of us non-martial artists? Like, if I was to call myself a fighter, no way really am I. But let's say I was being cocky and I was like, I'm gonna beat you guys up. Come here and I'm gonna deck you. Now, am I a fighter for getting into a fight? No, I'm an idiot. I'm a barbarian. I'm a thug. I'm not a fighter. There's no etiquette. There's no discipline. I'm just wild. There's no training. There's no understanding. And these are the particular distinctions I see with someone like Falcon Black. Is he will understand the boundaries. So he's not, especially if it's in combat sport. He's not there to kill the person. It's a sport. He has to be considerate of his limitations, going too far. Like, he shouldn't choke them to death, kind of thing. So he has to be considerate of his opponent's safety, as well as implementing his martial arts skills, which is no easy task, I'm sure. And I'm sure if he does hurt the other guy, there's an element, you feel guilty and sorry because, like, I didn't really mean to break your arm. I was just trying to pin you down. And someone like this, who is disciplined and trained in such a way, I see as having, they learn honor. And I'm sure he would agree with me that a lot of fighting is with your mind. It's not really about the physicality of it. It's this mental fortitude that accompanies it, which is what makes a fighter with distinction, as opposed to just someone who has skills and is talented. And because of this respect for the opponent, regardless of the opponent's skill level, just because they're a novice, you're not going to ridicule them. You understand that they're a novice. It was expected that they might lose against you with your expertise, but you respect them for who they are, where they are, because you were like them once before. And I see that as being very honorable, very respectable. Now, compare this to someone who is a brute or a thug, who is just boomtastic. They're just wild. They're not composed. They're reckless. They're lashing out. They're screaming. They're a brawler. That kind of person, I mean, I don't see them looking to learn any self-mastery. There's no discipline. They'll probably be angered at the notion of having to have some self-regulation taking place. They want to be wild and just lash out, kind of thing. So they're not there for the ethics of fighting. And quite often with fighting, it's almost like a dance. So there is a relationship with your partner, your opponent, who you're entangling with, and they're not really there with that appreciation. I mean, so why does someone like that, why are they there fighting then? What is it they hope to gain when they're fighting? We'll be looking somewhere to satisfy their sense of security, because quite often it's probably a lot of insecurity, and this is why it's such a big show of what they would probably describe as toxic masculinity, but a big show of testosterone or like power and dominance. So it's someone who is determined to have control, pushing and shoving, because secretly deep down inside, they don't really have control. It's that contradictory paradox again. Now, because a true fighter, and if Falcon was here, I'm sure he would be a testimony towards it. But a true fighter may lose a match or a bout or a fight or whatever. They may lose, right? You're not going to always be victorious. But when he loses, he hasn't lost his sense of security. He still knows who he is, and he can therefore be humbled. His pride might be a little bit bruised. He might try to address where his flaws were before, but he looks at it as something to learn from and part of the experience. Now, someone who isn't a true fighter, who is more like a thug, and they lose, well, you can imagine how they react. They become, well, more infantile-like, I suppose. Right. Now, I hope we're keeping everything cool in the chat. Try to refrain yourselves from being triggered. Deep breaths, everyone. Bite your lip if you have to. Try not to bite your tongue off, but breathe, center, calm down. So when people will talk about wanting peace, is this truly what they are wanting? Or how do they define it? What do they mean by it? And I think we're going to find that the peace they are wanting is actually from their hyper-vigilant ego, which is throwing them into battle. And their inner self is just exhausted. It's always been put in this hypersensitive state of alertness, on the edge. The anxiety and stress levels are they're peaking, and every day they're being told from their ego, you're in danger and you need to defend yourself, when this isn't true. This is a distorted view of reality. So there is an additional issue of not being able to trust your surroundings, and you've got this hypervigilance that is making you overly reactive to things. It's like I say, you're right, dickhead, how you doing? And the other person is like, you just bloody called me a dickhead. It's like, I say, I wasn't literally called, I was just being jokey with you. Sorry. It's like, well, I can't. And for the rest of the day, they're pissed off with me because I called them a dickhead when I didn't even really mean it. So it's like blowing things out of proportion. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have called him a dickhead, but you get the point, it wouldn't matter. No, bloody notification. It wouldn't really matter what you said to someone like that. I mean, you could say like, hello, sunshine, how you doing? And they'd be like, are you being sarcastic? What do you mean? I'm not your buttercup. Girl, what do you think I am? It's like, whoa. I'm just, never mind. Forget I said anything. So perhaps this is really what is meant when people are saying they want peace, is not the peace in the community. It's please, community, can you bring peace to my inner world? It is not really you that I'm fighting with. It's a fight I'm having with myself, fundamentally. It's myself versus my ego. And I cannot distinguish the two. I believe I am my ego, and we are one and the same. I have enmeshed with my ego, and I don't know how to individuate. So please help me. And I don't know how to ask for help. So what I know, or what I'm familiar with, my love style, as it were, is to be in a fight. Because logically speaking, if we were looking to stop a fight, I mean, it should, in theory, be pretty easy, right? You just basically stop engaging, and there's nothing to be gained. So there is no real point in fighting, especially in a digital landscape in the cyber world. This isn't the old days of drawing swords and fighting for land or something like that. So it doesn't logically make sense. So there must be an emotional element to this. And what would be the emotional gain from fighting? Well, it would be to satisfy the needs of the ego. And note that it's the ego's needs, it's not really the person's needs. The ego doesn't care about you. Make no mistake, it's not your friend. It's there to do a job and to keep you alive. It has no regard for what's in your best interest. It has no idea. It doesn't even want you to have any existence. So the ego is very selfish in that sense, and that is why when it's trying to defend, it's defending itself. It's not defending your self-esteem. It's defending itself. And these conflicts, these fights, and alterations is for the benefit of to make the ego feel better, and to make you as an individual, the sense of self, feel more ashamed, because you have to be reliant on the ego to look after you, when really it should be the other way around. So that's the warrior section. I hope adds a little bit of something to think about. Now I want to talk to you guys about something on a personal note. How, for me, this took place. So I would like to tell you about my drug addiction story. When I was younger, I used to smoke a lot of cannabis. A lot. Sorry, Kush. I mean, ounces every, I don't know, like under a week, spending tons of money, meeting dealers on the corner or in shady, dodgy places. And it was in every aspect of my life, now I used to say to myself that, like, oh well, I don't want to be a bum of a stoner that does nothing, that's just monging like a vegetable. I'm going to be proactive, and this cannabis intake helps to get me creative and busy. So, and I could handle it. I could be like a chimney and not really be licked off my face. I might be, maybe occasionally, but otherwise I could handle whatever I was taking. So there I am, basically lying to myself. Now the cannabis did not judge me. It was always there for me. It was my stability, and eventually it was becoming my identity, and in turn me. I was the cannabis in a way. And this is for many years. So it become the norm, a way of life, etc. And things around me would change, and I'd be unhappy. But there was the unconditional love I was looking for from the cannabis. And I suppose it was spurred on when my 12-year relationship detonated, and I had started to say no to her abuse. Maybe I was continuing that sort of aspect. I was like, well, I've now got experience of saying no, and I don't like living in denial anymore and fooling myself. So regardless of how brutally honest and true something might be, I will choose that truth over lying to myself. which is an indication that despite maybe having a low self-esteem, there is some esteem. I value authenticity and truth, at least to some margin. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered to say no. And then I had this realization of what I was saying to you now about the cannabis, that it didn't really care for me. You could basically say that the cannabis was my ego. It didn't care about me. It wasn't my friend. It was lying to me. It wasn't giving me unconditional love. It was heavy conditional, you know? I had to meet people on corners. I had to get into debt and risk getting arrested or something like that. I had to buy all the other paraphernalia to go with it. I had to. It was becoming. It was. It had its restrictions. Put it that, you know. And it wasn't making me feel happy. It wasn't making me feel better about myself. And this wasn't love. And this was not me. So I had to start saying no to it. Now, I had enough awareness to realize that at this stage, I probably wouldn't have the power to stop and resist. So basically, what I'm saying is, given the chance, I would continue. And I was in the camp of, I'm going to go to cold turkey. I'm not going to wean myself off. It's going to be an abrupt end to this. So I had made that decision. Next came the dilemma of like, so how do I break the cycle? How do I overthrow the tyrant of an ego that won't let me abandon it? So I had to be smarter. I had to outsmart myself. And I decided, right, knowing what I'm like and how weak-willed I am, I'm going to have to come up with a way to outsmart myself. And so I decided, right, I'm going to make myself bankrupt. So I remember buying like the last ounce of weed, and I was like, this is it. When this is finished, that's it. No more. And that day came. And I found peace. It was kind of strange. There wasn't any like withdrawal symptoms as such, because I knew it was coming, and I started to think of the benefits. So from going from saying no, I was then able to start to say yes to myself. Yes, I deserve this better way of living. Yes, I deserve to take better care of myself. Yes, I deserve to save money now because I'm not spending it on that stuff. Yes, I remember having a peace of mind that I can now drive with freedom, that if ever I got pulled over, I would be clean. So I could drive with safety. And that, I didn't realize how much of a relief that was. How much of an anxiety that was giving me before. Being stopped and it's like, oh, I've got some stuff on me, and it being discovered. It's like if the police wanted to stop and search me, I'd have no problem with it, you know. So that kind of peace of mind. I didn't have to meet people on dodgy corners or get into these weird transactions like, okay, I'll pay you next time, or can I get twice as much and borrow, and it's all this crazy financial malarkey. And also, I didn't need to meet up with my dealer anymore, who was trying to be, you know, as dealers are, they kind of create a relation with their clients or whatever. But in all truth and honesty, well, this guy doesn't give a monkeys about me. He just wanted my money. And he didn't care if he had me waiting on the street corner or something like that for it late into the night, in the rain or whatever. And there he is living it up on my cash. So that was so I started seeing all these benefits. and the ability to be like, well, yes, now I can spend that money on myself instead of just burning it away. Yes, I am now controlling this addiction and by proxy this ego uh, hunger. And yes, I can be free, so that was an interesting flip of from no to yes. And it made me wonder, well, what would happen if there was people around me smoking weed? Would I cave in? Now, for a duration of time, there wasn't anyone around, but this query still occupied my mind because I wanted to test it. I wanted to know if I had the fortitude to resist and say no. And it came along one day. I met up with someone. They offered, "Hey, I'm smoking. Would you like some of this?" And I declined, and that made me feel good. Being able to say no, and being satisfied that I don't need this anymore. I mean, I can still remember the smell. I can still remember what it's like to be kind of merry, like high and giggly and all this. And yeah, it's fun and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, cool. But I don't necessarily need it. I'm good. So I wanted to share that story as an example of my own personal battle with parts of the ego, and how sometimes it could be so hard that when you know your enemy in a way, um, and you know the limitations of who you are, and because you're still weak at this stage, you haven't built the strength to be able to stand up against this protector you recruited to look after you. Um, then one of the ways to do it will be you have to start thinking of how can you outsmart yourself? How can you do that? And that's how I did it. I intentionally made myself broke. Um, Now this next section, let me get my tea cold now. All right, I'll have to switch over to something else. So to the guys on the receiving end of attacks of the fighting, I know it's not nice feeling like you're a punching bag, but as we go further into this conversation and you realize what is driving all this sort of behavior, hopefully you'll come to understand that unfortunately it's a necessity. It's the thugster of the ego and not really the man himself who is being abusive in such a way. And not to sound too dehumanizing, but the angry ego who is throwing these punches, they don't really even see you as a person. They see you really like a punch bag, and your job in their eyes is to take these blows to help them feel better. So you're providing a care service. You're being forced into the carer's role, unfortunately. This is why it's happening. It's not because they're trying to smite you out. That's actually counterintuitive. They don't want to do that. And it's nothing that you've done personally either. Which is kind of like, so I hope that's like Tim could see that it wasn't personal, and this is why we wanted to get under his skin. But on the flip side, sometimes when people understand what's happening, it's like, you're not really fighting me, these are your inner battles that you don't know how to internalize. So you have, so I'm this is why I'm here to help you. That's not what they want to hear. They're hoping you will fight back, unfortunately. So the calmer you are, the more compassionate and caring that you'd think logically this would be the way to go, but emotionally this is infuriating them because it's like the medicine, it's like the bitter medicine they don't want to swallow. So they can't see you as an actual person. You are the punch bag. Only the inner child, the sense of self, could see other people. But in the case of this individual, this inner child is being locked away and only the ego is present. So the inner child is not allowed to see you. And this is another reason why they can't see you as a person, because there is no person to see this person. It's only an ego going after, at most, your ego. So you'll notice that quite often attacks are of a dehumanizing nature. You become a collection of labels and insults and slurs and derogatory terms, maybe a character assassination, but there is nothing actually of a personal nature really component in there. This is about putting you down in such a way that the other person can be elevated above. And this is the relationship style of what the ego wants. It wants to be above and you below. It doesn't want to be on the same plane, on an equal footing. So the only way it can't elevate itself. The way it does it is by pushing you down and stepping on you. So these interactions, it has that kind of flavor to it, where it's like, I'm better than you, and I will tell you what for and how things should be, and I'll dictate and I will control, and you are nothing, and you should be trying to embarrass and shame you. So you can see that set up quite clearly, or it becomes more evident. But I know this is still, even with all this, understand it's still not nice. I appreciate that. So people have their limits, obviously. So eventually, it can be too much of a ordeal that your ego starts to step in. It says it's had enough, and it makes the situation compounded. But I'm hoping that with more and more deep dives and understanding and awareness, we're going to come to a point of realization where if we are to mature and become actualized men, then the ego in this sort of form is pretty much useless. Well, we're going to talk about the ego death at some point, but it really is. This is the childish, pugnant sort of sides of us that we give it way too much credit than it deserves. And so we need to discover new ways of coping and for that to be utilized instead. And what we'll find typically is that the only effective alternative is through authenticity, which only the sense of self can provide. So that inner self, which is looked upon with such disdain and contempt, is the key to breaking this cycle and to getting freedom from this tyrant of an ego. So we need to find, and this is the inner peace. This is the peace that people are talking about. How do I make peace with that inner part of me I hate so much? It's like I'm dying here. I need to survive, and the one thing that will help me survive is the same thing I wish was dead. How do I resolve this paradox? And typically, if this is where you need to outsmart your ego, because if you allow yourself to think about it and try and give it a bit of a choice, then your ego won't allow you to make that choice. So the only way, you have to kind of double bind yourself. You have to twist your own arm into swallowing that bitter medicine. And so you need to put yourself intentionally, and perhaps this is why a lot of these conflicts happen, is trying to intentionally put yourself in a situation where the only way of surviving it is to make peace with your inner self as an ally. Because as much as you try to use your ego to defend you, it's not going to win this battle. So if your survival instincts are that strong, you can bet your bottom dollar that it'll quickly make peace with that inner child, should the circumstances be right. Should the desperation be high enough that the ego is not adequate. Your survival will make amends with the inner child and make allies with it. And then you'll realize you don't really need your ego. You gave it far too much credit than it deserved. And your inner child, your sense of self, is far more potent in a way, or capable, because you've got this distorted view. Who's been telling you this distortion? It's your ego. So you've had this devil in your mind telling you distorted. You're not in reality. You're being told distorted things. This is why you're hypervigilant. Hypervigilance isn't an accurate portrayal of reality. It's a distorted, magnified look at what you're seeing. So, not to sound too mean about it, but you're in the realm of delusion. If you're heavily reliant on such distortions to an extent where you can't calibrate yourself, and you can't tell what really is authentic and what's what. You don't know if someone is trying to be nice to you because you perceive it as a threat. Then you're in a delusional state, and it needs to be addressed. So stop going to your ego for clarification, because it's not your friend. It's going to amplify these distortions for you. The one that knows the truth, more likely, is that inner child who's been sitting there watching it all take place. But even they need some help. And in part, this is why we're having these conversations as well. So for the people on the receiving end of this emotionally heightened individual who is treating you like a punch bag, try as you can, by not acknowledging, by not validating the ego, and in turn signaling some sort of importance to it or significance to it. Otherwise, this person will keep using their ego because it seems to be working. It's getting your attention. So it will keep using the ego for these interactions. And what you should really try to signal to the person is, I will only talk to you if you put your ego aside. I'm only interested in talking to that inner child, the truth, the honest part of you, not the distorted monster that's inside. They're not welcome here. What was that? I've got a ghost in here. Right. And by ignoring the ego, it's not like saying an F you to the ego, but it's actually placing a higher value to the human, to the soul, to the inner child of both you and them. It's like it's like, why would my sense of self be talking to some entity that isn't a real person? You're talking to a program. The ego is a survival mechanism to ensure the organism's chances of survival. You are not your ego. Your identity is not your ego. Your ego is not a person. But we get confused and we think when we're addressing the ego, we're addressing a person, a real person, and it's not true. You are talking to a survival mechanism. It might as well be a computer program that has just gone rampant. And so that's a disrespect to you and to that person who has this operating system. We value human life more than survival programming. Um, and now we'll move on to this. So this relationship idea is vertical versus horizontal. A quick question for some of you in the chat. When we talk about ego, where do you picture the ego in your mind? Where, if you could pinpoint the location, where does your ego live? How would you describe it? Where in your body? Like presumably you'll say inside your head somewhere or in your brain somewhere. So where in that part of your brain do you picture your ego living? Any guesses? Anyone brave enough to want to throw something out there? Let's see what you have to say. No? Okay. I'll suggest a common sentiment I think people may have when they think of where does the ego live. They think it lives at the top of their head, like a hat, the ego, and the rest of me is underneath. Is this true? Actually, no. But we have the ego that we've promoted into a position of authority to reign above us like an umbrella, and the rest of us lives in its shadow underneath. It is above us and we are below it. And so this is an up-down relationship. One is greater than the other, but one is higher than the other. This is not good, my friends. This is the narcissistic setup. Not saying it's restricted just to narcissists, but I mean, this is where I've learned it from. So that's why I mention it here. We see this orientation with man and woman. Notice how men and women don't get along anymore. And what is a lot of this grievance about? It's because one is better than the other. So one is greater than the other. This isn't good. Men and women should be side by side, right? This is true equality. Because at this point, then they are in balance. One is not above the other, and one is no more important than the other. They are not the same. They don't occupy the same space, but they are on the same level. And this is a balance and equality. So the equality that the feminists describe isn't this horizontal relationship. They have a vertical. The feminists are above everyone else. So we can see how unequal that really is. And so this is also could be applied to the philosophy of MGTOW and the manosphere. I mentioned it in the previous one, but I'll mention it here because it is relevant, which is that MGTOW or whatever philosophy really should not be above you. It should be beside you. And in that way, you can have a much better relationship. So what does this mean about the sense of self and ego? That they should be side by side, working together, not one over the other. Because you do need your ego. It does have some uses. It just needs to be kept in check and under control from your sense of self, mainly and mostly, or whatever. So it doesn't become a monster of a survival mechanism. And this is where the big problem has become, because at some point, this ego has become super inflated and has become a mutated monster that is desperate to survive. And during that time, the sense of self hasn't learned how to have resilience and look after itself. Okay, so waffling on us a little bit, trying to keep it on topic. Hope we're all following and hope it's all relevant and helpful. I'm now going to read to you a letter from the inner child, if they were allowed to speak without the ego interfering, because the ego would not want the inner child to have a voice. So with this letter, could be from a boy or a girl, this is what I would imagine the child inside. This could be what I'm about to read could be something that is being whispered in the chambers of your heart, if only it could be heard. So let me just have a moment here, a second. Right. So I need to fight because this is how I feel love. Stop fighting. When I say stop fighting, what I really mean is just do as I want. Stop resisting. I need your help, and the way I ask for it is by provoking you. I don't want to sound vulnerable, so I put on a strong mask, and when I say, fuck you, I really mean to say, I'm fucked. People say they want peace, but that peace is unsettling. I'm uncomfortable with it. The peace I look for among people, I look for peace among people because I struggle to find that peace within myself. I was taught that to be loved, is to be hurt. I'm sorry, hold on. I was taught that to love is to hurt people. I was hurt. I want love. So I look for pain and I make it happen. In truth, I don't really want to hurt you or others, but I don't know any other way of love existing. I don't trust it. It makes me feel vulnerable. I have traits that make it harder for me. My survival strategy protected me before, and I thought it would still work now. I still rely on it to protect me, so I must find ways for it to manifest. That validates having it, and eventually I hope it will make me feel better. This is what I mean when I say stop fighting. This is the internal fight I have within myself that I struggle to let go. I need it. I'm frightened to let it go so that healthier ways could come in. I'm trying to avoid myself. That is why I reach out to you. Antagonizing you has proven the most effective way for me. I might even be aware that I'm doing such things, and if I search deeply within, I would find perhaps some honesty. But I'm scared of it. I'm scared to see what I have become. How do I feel better about myself when it is myself that upsets me the most? I feel helpless and afraid. I don't believe in myself enough to trust it can or will help me to actualize. I need people to show me how. But what I see or am told makes me have to confront myself, which I don't want to have to do. So my defenses, my ego won't allow me to step aside from it. I am held hostage and it reigns over me. I am at the mercy of my inner savior, my apparent inner savior, and it doesn't do what's best for me. It does what's best for it. It doesn't care about the destruction it causes, as long as it serves its purpose of keeping me alive and surviving. And now that I am older, I feel and I realize this isn't letting me have a life of my own. Sometimes I have awareness, I have hope, I see how it could work and how and what's involved. But I relapse. My ego defenses reasserts itself. It won't let me abandon it. I don't believe I have the inner strength to fight my ultimate protector. When I am withdrawn, I am in company with this monster and it punishes me and my soul for wanting help. It sinks its claws further into me. When I re-emerge, it projects its anger and frustration with me and wants revenge and payback. In those moments, my soul is nowhere to be seen. The ego has embodied me. With my shame and embarrassment, I blame myself for its actions and behaviors. And I take the responsibility for what it has been doing. It wants me to think of it. It wants me to think it is me and who I am. And I find it hard to believe that it is not. It is the bully within me. It will steal my achievements and my praises, and I will feel even more undeserving. I confuse it with me. So when these battles take place, my ego feels alive, and I get to feel alive through it. Otherwise, I feel non-existent. I create an arena or use places I can turn into an arena for this exchange to take place. I need you to take my pain away because I think it's harder for me to address it myself. This is the solution I have come to know, and I don't think there's any other way. There is me, but I don't think it can manage to cope against that ego. When things get close for comfort or truths are being touched upon, my ego becomes hypersensitive. Sometimes it makes me have to withdraw, where my spirit suffocates. This is why it's hard for me to take good advice. My ego won't allow it to reach my soul, to the ears of my soul. It filters it out and misinterprets, deliberately distorting to keep me disorientated. The ego dominates what I hear, and my landscape is one I can't navigate. I need my ego to guide me. If I listen to advice, to me it feels like I'm being killed. It is my ego that's dying, which is under attack, but it sacrifices me, my soul, instead. So I'll defend my ego. Who I battle really are figments of my ego's imagination. They are reminders of my inner child my ego wants to destroy. And this is the message my ego gives me as to why we are going after someone. I may sometimes be hypocritical because I do not know anymore what it is that I want, and I mislabel with distorted definitions. This is why I can say I want peace but see hostility. My focus is on safeguarding, and so I cannot allow myself to have peace. What will fix me is the same thing that will kill me. I cannot allow for an ego death. because I feel I need it to survive. Even if I know this is wrong, I believe it is the only way it can be. But maybe if I learn that when people see through me, my ego will no longer be effective and I will no longer need it to protect me, and I don't have to hold it above me. And so that's the letter basically. And we see at the end it's describing this kind of paradox and trying to derive some kind of solution. And this is what ends up happening. So I hope that was of interest or help. And I will ask again, has anyone seen the video I did a while back? Hold on, I have to bring it up. Pain is all I have. Because I'm going to play it now. Regurgitate it. Because in a more clinical way, it describes what I'm trying to express here, I think. And videos, right. Pain is all I have. Okay. Hold on 1 second. They put ads on my videos. And I don't get any of the revenue. C'est la vie. Right. Now, how do I... Right, so this will have to go bye-bye. Let me see if I can make that bigger. Yeah, there we are. Right, so share that. Right, I suppose I'll have to mute myself while I play this. Yeah, what's going on here? Go to the beginning. Now, in the intro, they will say some words, and I think it's pretty deep. This is when you identify with the trouble when you identify with your ego, which is the source of your pain. So in this video, it's called "Pain Is All I Have," and it's a video about diabetes. But we can supplement these words with ego and community space. So when I'm talking about diabetes in this video, you could say that that's your ego, right? That's in the diabetic ego. But so if you think this idea of that the diabetes has a life of its own, you can replace that word with ego. And when you hear in this video they're talking about doctors and caretakers, this could be the community and members within the community. So pay particular note to what is being said. Greetings. This video is in preparation for giving a talk to type 1 diabetics who are having a rough time managing their condition. As it's dealing largely with emotions, it can also be applied to people without the condition. This will be a painful conversation, and it might not apply to everyone. Really, it's for the people it resonates with and their consultants. The aim here is with exploring, we can gain a better awareness and understanding of what the diabetic is going through. No fault of the doctors. They are trying to treat an illness with logical steps. The trouble I feel is, with brief consultations, it glances over the patient's depths of emotion. And to be fair, it's not quite in the consultant's field of expertise. This is in the realm of therapy. With only a consultant, this can leave the patient feeling they aren't being seen as a complete person, and they want the pain of their soul to be seen. Therapy, if chosen, will need to be prepared to deep dive for the patient to then be able to address their emotional needs. For the struggling diabetic, this is trauma they are dealing with. Optimistic words of encouragement sadly won't be enough and likely isn't what the patient is looking for. Treating the symptoms and not the problem. Directions given by doctors can feel dehumanizing, with a sense of handing over control the patient has already established for themselves. Failing to follow the doctor's advice can create feelings of guilt or shame on top of failure. Logically, for the doctor, it might not make much sense, but this isn't about logic, it's about emotion. It doesn't make much logical sense for the patient either. They know they should be taking better care of themselves, and there is an extensive amount of support available. However, the more help is offered, or the more people try to understand and show compassion, it doesn't really help the diabetic. It is the diabetic who needs to make those connections matter, which they'll find hard to do if their esteem is low. The result is compassion fuels self-pity, and what the diabetic is really looking for is sympathy. You can't love someone back to health, but you can give them a shoulder. From the patient's point of view, how could people understand when they don't understand themselves? In some ways, they don't want to be understood. Exposing true feelings creates vulnerability, nor do they want to feel responsible for burdening bystanders with their distress. With self-esteem so low, the diabetic may feel like they've let the doctor down more than they've let themselves down. Likewise, if the blood results come back good, the patient can feel elated, having pleased the parental figure, which then allows the patient to feel happier with themselves. Of course, the doctor probably doesn't see it like this. Parents direct care for their children. We can note here, the diabetic, try as they might, isn't able to regulate their emotions effectively on their own. Self-medicate. This private world creates a sense of speciality they can feel they can just about manage, and it's something they can hold on to for stability. A damaged sense of self can mean they attach to the problem as their identity. The patient splits and switch places. I am the problem which the diabetes has. Now, that I think is very pertinent to what is taking place. This this way of looking at a person's they're split, they're splitting inside, and they're identifying with their ego and who they think is their inner child, or the true authentic self, the real man. They're looking at that as the problem, and you can see how this will cause this won't resolve the issue. This is the cycle mentality. This is the trap. This is the paradox going round and round on its own. And so this is why I was trying to make a point of saying that the ego is not a real person. However, in this mind, it has taken its own persona. It seems to be alive. It seems to be higher and above the real man buried deep within. And this is it's tragic. This is the troubles with trauma. So we'll let it continue. This is soul destroying, preventing the self from being unified. By separating, the illness can't hurt the individual as much. They create distance from the pain. The pain is not from the diabetes, it is from the self they are trying to get away from. There is an incentive reason to then be evasive or avoidant to treatment. If the problem allows existence, then fixing the problem in effect forces the individual to confront the pain that the self is carrying. To them, this is a threat to survival. Although distant from the problem, there is still a need for it. The self is where they can store the pain. Please don't take my pain away. It's all I have, and it means everything to me. Please don't take my pain away. It's all I have, and it means everything to me. That is, not blow my own trumpet, but that is the profound message that is internalized. This is what is being said to yourself. That I need this, I deserve this pain, I need this pain, it's all I have, I identify with this pain. And we see here now that the ego, although it's a survival mechanism, it is one hell of an abusive overlord to be allowing to have power of your life. And it is abusing, this is self-harm, it's abusing yourself and making yourself the slave to your emotions, the carrier of all the blame and punishments and abuse. And we can see how someone may feel, well, we'll cover it in this video a little bit, with the learned helpless, that they feel like there's nothing they can do. So this needs to be rectified. A turning point needs to take place for this break of the paradox to shatter, if there is to be hope, and for change to take place. And which is why when people are trying to give advice and point things out, we can see how it's not hitting home. It's not allowed, the message is not allowed to be received. It's more than just because it's uncomfortable. It's being intercepted and filtered and distorted and misconstrued. So these are multiple problems that need to be addressed to get the clarity to then be able to take to make the self assertive, to stand up for yourself. The diabetic sinks further into a cage of despair that they now call home. The world is reduced and perceived as a mentally safer environment. This might be strange to grasp, but comfort can be found in solitude and familiarity. With frustration, a push-pull dynamic forms. They want help. Being alone in a world of pain and problems is torment, but are scared of what help would look like. Help that is offered is pushed away in defense as inappropriate for the situation they're in. Treatment becomes an opponent instead of a solution. If by some degree control of their condition does happen, it is an effort of continually bashing themselves into compliance with self-hate, rather than through a desire and motivation of self-love. Managing or healing becomes a painful experience all of its own. Additionally, resentment is directed at themselves for even wanting to improve. Feeling guilty. They feel wrong and punish themselves for just thinking about it. They deny themselves health and also happiness to remain in a position of needing to be cared for. This is how they medicate the pain. Learned helplessness. With it all getting too much, the patient, unable to process their emotions, may minimize problems as superficial or trivial, and their feelings are labeled as undeserving of such attention, to better mask the problem. This allows a problem to persist without the need of drastic intervention. Here we are seeing parts of denial. However which way they look at it, it is confronted with pain. So the way the solution is resolved is by what becomes most comfortable and least painful, and is reached subconsciously based on emotions. Unfortunately, by being immersed in so much emotion, they lose awareness, which helps explain why it could be hard for them to express and pinpoint what's going on, even if they're trying to be open and honest. A narrative forms to create context, meaning, and purpose, to justify and validate what is being experienced. It becomes ingrained and cyclic, which is intended to stifle progress. Going in circles with denial becomes predictable and helps to better build a false sense of stability. Even though this inner world is painful, they do not want to abandon it. Dreaming of a life that could have been without pain begins to creep in. Hope is then part of the narrative to retrieve sympathy. Feeling powerless feeds into victimhood and deflects having to take on responsibility. Thoughts of the past are felt with regret to increase the sadness, boost the sympathy, and pull in attention. The diabetic wants to be taken care of and feel loved. They become more withdrawn, waiting to be saved, and switch into self-preservation mode, doing minimal just to survive day to day. Trying to do more, even if possible with this mindset, feels counterintuitive and brings additional anxiety. They fear climbing, believing they'll fall from a greater height. So why climb? They then become more skilled at self-sabotage and find excuses and reasons as to why they aren't making progress. Trying to correct this carefully woven narrative and break the cycle will thus be extremely challenging because it's important for them not to let it go. We can now see before we even get to treat the diabetes, there are massive core injuries that need to be addressed. I'll leave it here for now. My apologies. There are many large areas of complexity which profoundly shape the mind that can't be covered in just one video. This is only scratching the surface. The situation can improve the more we explore. I'd appreciate some feedback on this introduction, not just from diabetics, but if you found it helpful in other applications. Thank you for listening. Okay, thank you for watching that video with me. I hope that was helpful. When we learn the lessons pain is trying to teach, we can then become free of it. Now, I spotted I'm not sure what's going on in the chat, but I spotted this comment from Angler. Why can't young men and older men work together? If we understand that this is outside of our issues, really, it's not our responsibility to make young men and older men work together. It's out of our locus of control, we might hear. So what matters really is yourself. This is looking out there so that you don't have to look in here. What happens outside between young men and older men? Yes, it might feel like a relevant issue that needs to be addressed. But should you really be holding that issue above yourself? You as an individual, not picking on you here, Angler, but I'm just saying for all of us, we've got to make sure, like, what Jordan Peterson says, tidy your bed kind of thing. You've got to make sure that you got your insides sorted out. And what happens outside will be a reflection of those changes that take place within. So, in a way, if you want to have a answer to this question, why can't young men and older men work together? It'll be, well, when those involved address their inner injuries and wounds and core issues, when they we do that self-reflecting and that soul searching, we may find that there will be that this issue, this external issue, will change. Remember at the start of the stream, we were talking about what is a true fighter. Well, it'll be along those lines. The true fighter or the true spirit will be one who is disciplined, who is who exercises self-control and restraint, who knows their boundaries and limitations, and doesn't allow it to reign over other people. And so, if someone is of less skill in a martial combative sport, that is not the criticism. That is not the fault of the person. This is seeing people for who they really are and having respect for them. For the older man to see the younger man and respect him for being a young man, and likewise, the young man will be able to look at the older man with respect. So it's a mutual respect, and you're not going to be able to have any of this respecting for one another if you don't first have respect for yourself, which means that your ego has to be put in check, because you can't have self-respect if you allow your ego to be the captain of your ship. So when you address that issue, the rest will fall in place and will improve. So we see with not, this is just one small example, but this idea of trying to control the outside world in compensation for not being able to control the inside world. That's where it needs to begin and originate. So there's no point trying to tell other people that, hey, why don't you lead the campaign to save humanity or something like that? How are they going to do that if there isn't a resolution to this internal conflict that is taking place? So when people can actually do this inner work, then there is then there is hope, then there is possible. Until that happens, it won't just be young men versus older men. You'll have men versus women. You'll have communities versus other communities. These battles, these arenas that take shape. You'll hear me talk about arenas quite often. When we talk about when people say I'm tired of drama, we have created a supplemental vocabulary, and an alternative vocabulary to avoid saying what things really are. Because what drama really is an arena for this escapism to take place, for this exchange, for this I don't want to have to deal with my inner world. I don't know how. I don't have the tools. It's daunting. I'm scared to have to confront myself and look in a mirror. And all of this sort of, I don't like what I see, and I don't have the self-esteem. So to avoid all this, often, this drama takes place. So, and as someone pointed out, drama is theatrics. It's a show, it's a performance, it's not a real thing. So whenever you hear someone talking about drama, remind yourselves that this is a show, this is a production, this is something which is trying to take you away from what's really going on. And what's really going on is a battle inside that someone is trying to avoid. And what they believe is the solution is to instead of internalize and process the feelings and pain, is to externalize it and use other people to try and rectify the problem for you. And so in that way, even if they got what they wanted and had other people trying to fix their problems, it's never really going to fix the problems, because the problems were inside and never addressed. You can't, a doctor trying to treat deep wounds needs to do surgery. They can't just put a plaster on you and say, there you go, you're good as new. That's not, you're bleeding out. Your heart is bleeding out beneath the bandages. And no matter how many times you try and put additional bandages over it to try and cover up the mess, it's still bleeding out and will continue to bleed out until it's actually addressed properly. So drama is a poor man's way of dealing with injury. It's never going to solve the problem. And until there is some acknowledgement and honesty and a willingness to be more attentive and responsible and all this other stuff with what's going on and taking place, we're not going to make progress. We're just perpetuating this cycle of denial and delusion. The only real true way is through that pain. And I'm hoping that in your hearts of hearts, you understand that. You can't cut corners in life and expect it to work out well. The only thing you can expect to happen is that you may be able to delude yourself and fool yourself into thinking things are better. But truth be told, deep down, it's only temporary. It's only a desperate relief from what's really going on. And the only way that you're going to really put this behind and get a proper solution is if we get down to the crux of the situation. So that's more or less what I have to say about if I combine this stream with the previous stream, this hopefully is providing a better understanding and explanation as to why a lot of the time, and it's becoming more common, I see it in the same modality, just manifesting in different sort of ways. It's becoming, it's frightening to think that it's becoming normalized, but it's like it's being taught how to escape is now being cultivated in society, and in part is probably why we're seeing a lot of problems taking place. It's mostly projections, it's mostly escapism and failure to have adequate ways of coping with injuries and pain and anxiety and stress. So I hope this provides a guidance when we understand the problems better, that there is a lot going on beneath the surface of this bandaged injury. We need to take those bandages off and get in there and do some proper treatment. So I will leave it there. I think it's a lot to take in, a lot to acknowledge. Mull over it if you need to. If you need help and you want to talk privately, I'm more than happy to have these conversations with you. It is serious stuff. I have faith in each and every one of you. I believe there is humanity within. And I look forward to interacting with the sense of self more so than egos. Maybe we need to have a banner of like, leave your egos at the door type of thing. But anyway, I'm just debriefing myself, I guess. So have a good evening, good day. Treat yourself with kindness and more compassion. There's far more to you than you give yourself credit for. Don't listen to what your ego tells you. And treat each other as well with the kindness that you expect to treat yourself, that with the kindness that you should be treating yourself with. And I know that you're not, because if you were, you would be acting in accordance of a true warrior. You would have that warrior spirit, and you can see that that is not really happening. When you're hurting other people, you're also hurting yourself. So be kinder to people, and in turn, that can help teach you how to be kinder to yourself. And take it gradually, bit by bit. It's not going to happen overnight, and don't beat yourself up over it. We are all here to learn. This is life. That's what life is. A big lesson. So take care. Good evening. Thank you for your time and attention. And I'll see you soon.